Hi guys, Johnny on the track back here for another episode. And this one's going to be cool. This week we have a guest who's been worked in NASCAR for a very long time. He's actually moved on from NASCAR. He was a pit reporter for many years with ESPN, with ABC, with NBC. He now has taken a different job. He's a news reporter. His name is Mike Massaro, and the cool thing about Mike, he's a great guy. He's an amazing guy. He's a great storyteller, which I can't wait to listen to some of the things he has to tell us on the show. The cool thing about Mike, he's a guy I really look up to. He's a guy that has a similar path, for myself, looking, into the future and NASCAR and all that. He actually attended Emerson College, which, as some of you know, I've mentioned this on the show. I am graduating from Emerson College pretty soon, right around 2 weeks. So that'll be awesome. But Mike actually also graduated from Emerson. He loved Emerson College, loved his time there, and said it prepared him a lot for what's to come, what came in the NASCAR industry and his career. So we're going to talk some of that. We're going to talk his career. We're going to talk some of his greatest memories, his greatest moments, his greatest interviews. We are going to get to it all with Mike. And I cannot be more excited to have a guy that just is an awesome dude. And I know as soon as you watch a minute of Mike talk, you're going to be blown away because it's awesome. And for NASCAR fans, this should be right up their alley. This guy is a guy that made his name in the industry and had many great years on television. So we'll break down Martinsville just real quickly. So obviously we saw Martin Truex Jr. get his second win. Congratulations to Martin. I'm a huge Martin guy. I got video's not mirrored. So I got Chase Elliott here. He came in second. I think maybe with 5 to 10 more laps, Chase could have chased down Martin. Denny had a really good car on the short runs, but it couldn't hold long. And, that allowed Truex, Chase to cut the gap and finally make that move, with Truex obviously coming out on front. And it was crazy to see Blaney. And Ryan Blaney had a great car, probably the best car on the track, besides, Denny on the short runs. But all in all, I would say Ryan Blaney had the best car on the track. And it killed him. A late pit error killed him. And I think, Blaney's a very talented guy. He's a young guy, driving for Ford Penske. He has so much potential with, he already got a win earlier this season. I think for Blaney, he needs experience. He needs Cup years under his belt. Obviously, he's a winner in the Cup Series. But I think when he gets more experience, he won't make those errors, right? Martin Truex Jr. is not going to make that error. And again, a lot of it comes with the teams, the pit crews. It wasn't all his fault. It wasn't Blaney's fault. But I mean, he's the driver. He's the guy running the show, if you will. And so, that cost him. And I think with experience, he's got the talent, he's got the speed, he's got the team around him. Once he has experience in this league, in this series, he will be a really good driver and he won't make that mistake again. And it cost him. It cost him his second win on the season. Would have probably taken a huge jump. He probably would have moved into second on the point standings and went, high above in the playoff point standings, which are huge. But he won stage 1 and 2. And obviously Truex won stage 3. Quick preview of Richmond. I've got Chase. I keep doing that. What the hell? I keep doing that. I've got Chase Elliott winning this week. I think he's going to get his first win at Richmond. He's had a couple top fives in his career there. He's had a second place I think this is the year that Chase gets it done. He's going to carry his momentum that he had late in that race into Richmond, and he's going to get on the leaderboard for his first win. My top 5: Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch. I want to say Daniel Suarez is going to make the top 5 because I think this is a track where Suarez can really shine. And I'm going to go Ford Penske. I'm going to go Brad Keselowski for my 5. And yeah, I think it's going to be a good race. This is going to be most likely between JGR and Penske. But again, I picked a Hendrick driver, but they do well here. They've had fast cars here at Richmond for a while now. So I wouldn't be surprised if a Penske like a Blaney, like a Keselowski, like a Joey gets the win. But like I said, Chase Elliott will get his first win of the season. So with that all behind us, let's now fast forward to my interview with Mike Massaro. All right, so now we welcome our next guest to Johnny on the Track. He was a racing analyst and pit reporter for ESPN, for ABC, for NBC. His name is Mike Massaro. I'm sure you know him. He is now a NBC Connecticut news reporter. And of course, my favorite stat about him, call it a stat, whatever you want to call it, he is an Emerson College alum, where I will be graduating, in less than a month. So, Mike, thank you for coming on the show.
Might be my favorite description too. Proud of my Emerson time. Had a lot of good memories from my 3 years there, which is a story in itself. But yeah, Emerson College is a great place to learn the broadcasting trade and a great place to learn about life for sure.
All right, so let's get right into that then. Let's start there. So Obviously you went to Emerson, you played baseball there. You actually took a year off. You went back to UConn for a year, but you loved it so much, you decided to go back. So tell me something, obviously, like I said, I'm graduating in less than a month from Emerson. Tell me, how that prepared you for your long career in on TV and radio and whatnot.
Well, I don't know how long this podcast is, but there's a lot of ground to cover there, Johnny. Emerson College prepared me in so many ways. One, I mentioned life. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut and went to the big city of Boston. And that in itself prepared me for the real world. I saw a whole lot of the universe that I'd never experienced before and had to live there. Had to learn to get around the city, had to learn to survive in the city. It hardened me a little bit, and I needed that because the real world is not soft. It's not an easy place to live. As far as broadcasting goes, I went to Emerson, like most kids, I think, as freshmen do, without a clear direction as to what I wanted to do. So I was mass communications. I was not broadcast journalism. I was mass communications, which is very broad. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to realize that broadcasting was what I wanted to do. But I dabbled and took some classes in performance, in television production while I was there. And that helped me. You mentioned my transfer year. Well, that was after my sophomore year. My parents ran out of money, for a lack of a better way to describe it. Emerson was a private school, still is, expensive. My parents didn't make a lot of money. I, at the time, my sophomore year, to make it work, was living in an apartment with friends and paying for my own room and board. It was difficult to try to do what I was doing with a couple of jobs and balancing school. And at the same time, I became a little bit afraid. And I can see that this is probably still the case for a lot of students right now studying broadcasting. I was afraid that I'd get out of school and not be able to find a broadcasting job. And after putting as much work in as I did at Emerson, I made the decision to transfer to UConn, change my degree or my major, and become a political science major. I wanted to be a lawyer. That never happened. But while I was at UConn, which was a completely different experience, I went from a small school in a giant city to a giant school in a tiny little cow town, Storrs, Connecticut. And I consider that my year abroad because it gave me a little bit of a different experience. I didn't necessarily like it, and I missed Emerson. I missed the small school. I missed the city. I missed chasing broadcasting. I was able to keep in contact with the folks at Emerson who put together a financial package and allowed me to transfer back. So thankful that I did. My senior year was great. Had a lot of fun. Played on the baseball team again for my third year. I was in a fraternity just so much that I remember from that final year that stays with me. And it really kind of gave me the belief that that's what I wanted to pursue, broadcasting. So when I've got out of school, I tried really hard to find a broadcasting job, but like I feared as a sophomore, it was hard to do. It's hard to find a broadcasting job as a 21-year-old kid with zero real on-air experience. So I became a bartender. And so that didn't sit well with my parents, who, as I mentioned, had to sacrifice so much for me to go to Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
So after about a year and a half bartending at a ground round restaurant, so glamorous. Good memories there too, but that's a whole different podcast. My dad came to me after a year and a half of bartending and said, Mike, we spent all this money, we sacrificed. You wanted to become a broadcaster. Why aren't you doing it? I just shrugged my shoulders. I had no answer. So my dad came to me and suggested I volunteer at the Stafford Motor Speedway,
Yes.
which is a small racetrack near where I grew up. And the reason he suggested that was because the people who own the racetrack and still do are the Arute family, one of which is Jack Arute, who at the time in 1992, when I graduated from college, was an ABC sportscaster. My dad saw that. My dad saw that Jack Arute came through Stafford Speedway, made it to network television as a pit reporter for ABC Sports. He also did college football at the time. And my dad thought that if Jack could do it, then maybe I could follow that same path. And it wasn't just Jack. The current play-by-play voice for Fox Sports, Mike Joy, did the same thing, took the same path. So my dad saw both of them and thought, well, if I could maybe mirror their path, perhaps it would lead me to the same success. I had my doubts.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been a long, like, thinking in your head, that seems like a long shot, right? From your perspective.
It did, but I respected my father
Right.
and certainly understood the sacrifice he made and did what he asked. I volunteered at Stafford Speedway, and on the spot, Jack Arute surprised me and said, "Can you start Friday night?" Which was only a few days away. And of course I did. And for the first year, I worked as a public address announcer for free each Friday night. Learned a lot. And after a year, they asked me to be on the payroll as the public relations director, where I continued to be an announcer, but at the same time, I coordinated their communications. And that really got the ball rolling. It allowed me to meet a lot of people in the NASCAR world, the NASCAR broadcasting world. One thing led to another. And lo and behold, as you mentioned, it led me to ESPN and NBC Sports and a whole lot of other great things along the way.
So, I mean, that's an amazing story. You covered a lot there, which I love. But so I'll dissect a little bit of the Emerson side of what you said early on, and then we'll move to the Stafford stuff. But so my path is actually a little different than yours. I actually had coming in, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So for my senior project in high school, I wanted to be Mike Joy. I wanted to be Mike Tirico, Mike Breen, all these guys, that I admired growing up. The play-by-play voices for NBA, NASCAR, MLB, NFL, whatever it might be. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. And I think what I guess my parents might not want to hear, but the thing I've learned the most at Emerson is actually about myself, and that there's more to just sports than what I thought, which was this is the path I want to take. Well, I learned I like business and I like the marketing side of things. I've learned my strengths, which is doing stuff like this, communicating with others, and all that side of it. So from that aspect, our paths are a little different. I mean, we did both play sports, so I mean that's it's a similar path. But so I find that interesting that it was kind of the opposite. And maybe it's a change of the times, but I know a lot of other people had that same, for instance, my girlfriend had the same, experience coming in. I want to do journalism. I want to write. I want to write. I want to write. Well, she's off that path now, which, maybe is for the best, but learning about ourselves, I think is important. And I would say that's, something I've learned the most through it all.
Well, I would agree with you, Johnny. The first thing I think of is that you were a lot more mature at your age than I was. I didn't have clear direction. I knew I had it in my heart that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I think I didn't have the courage to pursue it. I became intimidated by the process. I was a little afraid that I wouldn't be able to make a living doing it.
Mhm.
And it, I still have some of that. It's a hard industry.
Yes.
So if you're pursuing it, you better have the gumption and you better have the determination to make it happen, because there is no guarantee it will. It's a difficult business to break into. It's a difficult business to stay in. I had someone tell me not too long ago that being on television is a fragile existence, and it is. You could be the apple of the eye of one producer, and another producer could see zero talent in you. It's that simple. And honestly, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Hate to sound cliche, but the producer is going to decide if you have a job or not. So it's a difficult business, and you have to be determined to make it happen. You also have to find a way to deal with rejection at times, which I've learned. It's not easy, but you have to stay with it. Have to definitely stay with it. I'm happy to hear that you have more clear direction than I had upon graduation. And
I'd like to say that. I mean, I'd like to think that, but we'll actually see in about a couple months, right? But
well, you've broadened your search.
yeah,
And the business aspect of sports, there's more opportunity, to be honest. It's incredibly difficult. I think I've stressed that enough, that to get into on-air broadcasting of sports, at least at a high level.
well, yeah. I mean, I appreciate everything you've said, and it's helped me grow just learning. I mean, we obviously talked a couple weeks ago, and everything you told me. I'm taking it all with a grain of salt and just taking it day by day. But so now I want to get into that Stafford stuff. So you had the early experience as the public address announcer, and you were at the racetrack all the time. Had that early job that you talked about. How about your love for baseball? Like, how did you balance something, that obviously I assume you were pretty good at, and something
I
you
was
love?
okay. I wasn't real good. I think Emerson baseball's better now than it was when I was there.
Well, I mean, they're not much better. I mean, I don't know, but we'll see. Who knows? But yeah, so tell
We
me,
did not win very many games. Let's put it that way.
we still don't. Baseball, soccer. Obviously, I played soccer, but we still don't win many games.
Well, it's all about being on the field and enjoying the ride.
Exactly. And I'm sure that's what we both did. I know for myself, I had a blast. And sadly, that senior season earlier this year got cut short. But, it was a great ride, and I loved every minute of it. The relationships I built, I'm going to stay in touch with all these guys for, years to come,
Well, you should. I know that I still stay in touch with my teammates and fraternity brothers from Emerson. Several of them were in my wedding. I stay in touch. I communicated with a couple of them this week. So, and that was, I graduated in 1992. So almost 30 years ago.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, tell me how you balanced all this stuff,
I think it was just easy, Johnny. I mean, it was just natural, just part of life.
Yeah.
I loved baseball, when I was in college, and continued to love baseball afterwards. But when I became a little more focused on my career, racing became my passion. I dove in head first, immersed myself in it, and learned everything I could. And honestly, there was so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I knew some of it. I had been around racing to a degree when I was a kid, not as much as baseball. Baseball, as you mentioned, I played. I never drove a race car. So I didn't have that hands-on real life experience, but I watched it. My dad worked on a race car, so I'd been around the racetrack quite a bit when I was a kid. We went to the Daytona 500, I think, every year since I was 12 years old on until I graduated college. So I'd been around the sport, watched it on TV, been to tracks like Stafford, Thompson, Monadnock. I remember going to Riverside Park, which no longer exists. But that's what I knew. But I knew it from sitting in the grandstands. I didn't know it from sitting in the driver's seat. So I had to learn a lot about it. I had to learn about driver's mentality, what really pushes them. I had to learn about the cars. I didn't know anything about race cars, really. And that is still an ongoing process because the technology changes every year.
Right.
So, and that continued even when I was at ESPN as a pit reporter, NBC as a pit reporter. I mean, every week I'd have to just really dive in and ask questions. to learn as much as I could. So balancing it, I never felt awkward balancing it. It felt natural. It's part of my life.
Yeah, I would say, for myself, right, that's interesting that you had to learn so much about the cars themselves, the engines, the motors, the tires, whatever. And I think, from a fan's perspective and someone like myself who loves the sport as an outsider, I think that's something that I want to learn more about. I want to be at a racetrack and see how they build the cars, what goes into it each week, because you hear about it. I mean, each week on the broadcast of everything that goes into having a great car. You look at a guy like Michael McDowell who brings a great car to the Daytona 500. There it is, his first career win. So, yeah, I mean, tell me about that aspect and like learning all of what goes into building these cars.
Well, learning, just asking questions. Talk to the crew chiefs, talk to the engineers, talk to the people who work on the cars. Maybe even build relationships where you could talk to them during the week, not just at the racetrack. So if
Mhm.
you have any questions, you could bounce them off of them. As a pit reporter, that was my job. Was my job. I mean, I got paid to ask them questions about the car, what it took to, get there, how the car was handling. So I was immersed in it. It's a 12-month a year process for the big teams, like at the NASCAR Cup Series level. They're building cars right now for next year. So it never stops. If you were in Charlotte, where the industry is predominantly based, you would have the ability to go to these shops and see what they do. You
Mhm.
could see their fleet of race cars on the floor. You could see these gigantic warehouse type shops that have dozens of race cars lined up, chassis in various states of finish. Some would be complete race cars. Some would be cars that just came off the track that may have been wrecked and they're repairing. And some could be in between. And all you see is the tube structure of the car without an actual body on it, just the frame essentially and the chassis. So you could walk around a shop with their permission if you're at that level, and you could ask questions about what goes into each car, what they're doing. And they have different builds based upon the racetracks they're going to. The race car is different for Daytona super speedway than it would be for Watkins Glen, a road course, or Bristol, a short track. I can only imagine what they had to do when they put dirt on the track at Bristol, how they had to change those cars.
Right.
I wasn't in the garage then, but I'm sure it was very interesting, all the things they had to change on those race cars, especially compared to a normal Bristol to the dirt Bristol. So they try to fine tune those race cars as much as they possibly can to meet the demands of the racetrack. And because of that, these teams not only have mechanics and crew chiefs, they've got engineers. They've got people who are paid a lot of money to sit in front of their computers. I shouldn't say it like that, because they do a lot more than sit in front of their computers, but they're crunching numbers,
Right.
and they're coming to the crew chief with ideas, things they need to experiment with in the wind tunnel or on the chassis dyno or something like that, to
Mhm.
try to figure out what's going to be best for the next race, or maybe even a race 6 months from now. But these engineers play a huge role these days.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, we just talked like you see all, Larson some days has a great car and he loves it. And then, what was it, 3 weeks ago? We thought he had the best car out there. He's leading every single lap. And then at the end, the car just wasn't built for the long runs. Blaney catches him, takes the win. So, I mean, yeah.
We saw it this week at Martinsville. Denny Hamlin was incredible on short runs. He even
Right.
said it afterwards. He said his car was great for 20 laps, but then it would go away. Unfortunately for Denny at Martinsville, that final run was a lot more than 20 laps. So
Yeah.
he was great at the beginning, but it faded. You saw the car fade, and Martin Truex and Chase Elliott were able to get by him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, engineering, and sometimes these crew chiefs have to make a decision. Do I want to be good on the short run, or do I want to be good in the long run? And part of that sometimes is strategy. Sometimes that's just they have no other choice. So just the way things turn out.
Right. So, and let's go a little bit now deeper into what you did, your job. You mentioned you were there asking questions of what goes into the cars. You were interviewing racers post race, during the race, whatever it may be. So, what do you think the most challenging part and I'm sure there's a lot. But if you could give me some things of the most challenging part about what you did for almost 20 years.
I think it's pretty easy. The most challenging part for me, and maybe not for some, but for me, was tiptoeing through the delicate balance of asking sometimes difficult questions in emotional situations.
Yes.
There are times when drivers are incredibly aggravated, very emotional for a variety of reasons, whether they got wrecked, whether they just didn't finish where they thought they should finish, whatever it may be. And sometimes those situations dictated tough questions. Why did it happen? And maybe the wreck was this person's fault, but he didn't feel it was his fault. And you'd have to ask about it. And sometimes it became awkward because drivers were not in the state of mind to answer questions like that sometimes. And it was difficult. It was a challenge. And sometimes, there were moments where it felt awkward on television. But you have to find a way to get through it. You have to ask the tough questions, because if you don't ask the tough questions, your boss is going to question you, and the audience is going to question you. And in this day and age, the audience, they've got Twitter, they've got social media, and they can reach right out to you, and they can make the world know that they felt that you didn't ask the right question. So it's tough, but you have to ask the right questions. You have to be ready to ask the difficult question, even in those emotional moments, but you have to find a way to do it tactfully. And sometimes that's easier said than done.
So this is a perfect segue into my next question, which has to do directly with this. And, you mentioned you have to ask tough questions. You have to. And we've seen, we've seen drivers like Kyle Busch give short answers, don't want to hear.
I've been on the receiving end, John, of the Kyle Busch short answers.
Right. So let's take stuff like that, for example. When you get those kind of answers of, yep, just here so I don't get fined. I'm all set. Good. See ya. Bye. Do you feel like the media is being disrespected by that? Or do you say, no, that's just part of the job?
That's part of the job. That's okay. If you give me multiple choice, yeah, that's the one I'd go with. It is part of the job. These are the stars. These drivers are the reason people are tuning into the broadcast. Sure, they appreciate what we do, but the main reason they're turning that television on that afternoon or that night is to watch Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon. I'm dating myself because these guys are Jimmy and Jeff aren't there anymore. But Kurt Busch, Chase Elliott, Martin Truex, Kevin Harvick. That's why they're tuning in. They're not tuning in to see me or anybody else on the broadcast. So
don't cut yourself short, Mike.
No, they aren't. I can assure you of that. But you have to deal with it when they're angry. I don't have a definitive answer. I don't think there is one true way to go about it. You just kind of have to roll with the punches sometimes.
Yeah. I agree. And right now, there's a couple of guys in the Xfinity series right now that give no short of a top tier 10 out of 10, full show with some of the interviews they've been doing. But like you said, it is part of the job, and we do tune in to see that stuff. We don't like to say it sometimes, but we tune in to see the Joe Graf Jr., whoever he, went fisticuffs with yesterday. That's some of the stuff, and being there.
I think it was Ray Galding, by the way, I believe.
Yes. So we do tune in to see that stuff. We do tune in to see Jeff Gordon after Brad Keselowski, that stuff. It's the antics that we love, and I can only imagine what it's like when you're asking Jeff Gordon or Kyle Busch or whoever it may be those questions.
Well, Jeff Gordon, was always a true pro. It didn't matter what situation he was in. You could ask him just about anything, and he would not turn on you. Kyle, a little different. Kyle was very emotional. Kurt, very emotional. There's a few others. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. That are fiery and don't necessarily want to answer those questions in the heat of the moment.
Right.
But The audience loves it. The
Yeah.
audience does love it. I had a producer tell me one time, tell the entire team one time, he said, hate sells. And it does. I
Yeah.
mean, you think back to one of the moments people believe put the sport on the map. And this is before your time, Johnny, but I'm sure you've heard about it. The 1979 Daytona 500. Okay, there was an ice storm, very wintry weather in the Northeast at the time. The Daytona 500 was one of the only things on television because in 1979 we didn't have 200 channels. We essentially had three. And that was the big sporting event of the day. So there was a captive audience in the Northeast for the 1979 Daytona 500. And it was a great race, and people were glued to the TV. And lo and behold, at the end, there was a fight. And, Cale Yarborough and the Allison brothers going at it on the backstretch at Daytona. Here I am in 2021 talking about something that happened in 1979. And that fight, to a large degree, helped NASCAR gain a huge audience. People tuned in. People were like, wow, this is cool. This is really fun. This is exciting. Look at the passion on the racetrack. And a lot of people to this day believe that moment helped build the sport.
And there's something to be said about the fans too. The fans, they have not changed. NASCAR fans, the sport has changed. I mean, it's gone in different directions. Obviously, you've seen it, but the fans are still those crazy fans that, either live by one guy, die by another guy. I mean, it's still that the passion of NASCAR fans is something that I really do think helped get me into my love for the sport. And you talk about Jeff Gordon, he was my guy growing up. I mean, the car, the look, whatever. And early on, if Jeff Gordon didn't win, I was, picking this and throwing that. And that's part of, NASCAR. It really is. And something I love. And obviously you've seen for how long you've been in the sport, right?
Yeah. Well, Johnny, where are you from?
I'm from Narragansett, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. So you're a Red Sox fan, I'm assuming, right? How do
Yes.
you look at Yankee fans?
I mean,
Same way, right?
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So Red Sox and Yankee fans, we don't always see eye to eye. I'm a Red
Right.
Sox fan. So, if you were a Yankee fan, I might just jump off the podcast. So, no, I'm kidding, of course. But, you talk about the rivalries. Now, the Red Sox Yankee rivalry is very much what it was like, say, for the Dale Earnhardt Jeff Gordon rivalry.
Yep.
I don't know necessarily that Jeff and Dale had a rivalry.
No.
It's their fans. Their fans had a rivalry. And I think that's very much what it is for the Red Sox Yankees. I see Red Sox and Yankee players fraternizing all the time. I mean, I'm sure they hang out and they're friends and what have you. But the fan bases, not so much. And that's the same as it is in NASCAR. The fans are very passionate. They're passionate about their particular team. I tell people all the time, especially people who haven't watched NASCAR and may not have been able to get into it. I tell them that you need to have a rooting interest, because once you have that rooting interest, you have that emotional tie, Johnny, that you just described. You need to be able to go through the emotional ride in anything to really appreciate it, especially sports. That's the only way you can appreciate the highs is when you've been through the lows with any sport. And, the same is, true for NASCAR. If you don't have a driver to pull for, then you probably won't feel it. And you need to feel it to enjoy it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we'll chirp the Yankees fans a little bit. They haven't been on the Red Sox level for quite some time. So, I mean, I don't know where that rivalry's been. But, I actually just saw something today that just today, the power rankings came out, and the Red Sox are ranked 20th and the Yankees are ranked third.
It's a little early to tell. We're taping this podcast on April 12th.
Yes.
So a long way to go. I would say the Red Sox have already seen some lows and some highs.
Yep.
I don't know what to make of them at this point. I'm not about to thump my chest on April 12th and say that the Red Sox are going to finish ahead of the Yankees. I hope they do, but I don't know.
We'll thump our chest for right now, I guess.
Yeah, we so far have won the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yes. So we talked about drivers. We talked a ton of drivers. Now I want to, get your perspective of who was and I think I could, I have some people in mind of who I think might be your number one, but give me your number one, if you have one, favorite guy to interview when you got that chance.
Oh gosh. So many drivers come to mind for different reasons. Uh, I enjoyed talking with Jeff Gordon all the time because I knew I was going to get an answer that I wanted to my question, and I wasn't going to get any backlash regardless. I may have asked the stupidest question in the world, and Jeff wasn't going to hang me out. Thankfully, that was not the case for others. I always loved going to Jeff Burton. I mean, he may not
Oh,
be the
yeah.
name you think of, but Jeff Burton was so insightful.
Yeah. Still
He
is.
he very much. That's why he does what he does with NBC
Right.
Sports. He was
Yeah.
a great get for them as their analyst, and tremendous insight. He was not only good at giving you the insight, he did it in soundbite fashion, which he was a broadcaster. Who doesn't love that?
Right.
But at the same time, and you may be surprised by this, I like to talk to Tony Stewart. I like to talk to Kyle Busch
Yeah.
because you got that emotion.
Right.
And that also helped make an interview good. Sometimes I would get backlash if they felt the question wasn't fair or appropriate or even intelligent. They wouldn't hold back and letting you know what they thought of the question. So there was that part of it, but I enjoyed talking to them because I knew the interview would come across as an exciting one that people were interested in hearing. So to answer your question, there's not just one person. There's a number of people that I like talking to because of whether or not they gave great insight, great information, great sound bites, or passion. There's so much involved. So there weren't too many drivers I didn't like to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And nothing short of spectacular than a Tony Stewart interview post race. I mean,
I've had some interesting ones with him.
he gave some absolute classics, and still to this day, that's the best part about Tony. You'll watch him, and every time you'll laugh again. And the one where I forget what he says, but Dale Jr.'s on his left, and he's saying something post race in the interview, and Dale Jr. can't help but laugh.
I may have been in that press conference. I think he was probably ripping a reporter, and Junior was laughing.
Yes.
It wasn't me. I don't think.
Oh, that's good.
Not that day. Not that. I mean, trust me, I've been on the receiving end of that too.
So let's get a little deeper. How about, do you have a greatest memory from your time in the sport? And maybe you have a couple, but
it's funny.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because it's the most recent, but I feel like the last race I ever did with NBC may have been my favorite moment.
Okay.
Which is weird because I walked away not too long after that. Not because I felt like I was at the high, but it just strange. The final race I did with NBC was the 2016 championship race in Homestead. And I had Jimmy Johnson's pit that day. Jimmy Johnson did not have the best start to the race. In fact, even before the race, he had trouble coming through tech, had to start at the back of the field. As you may recall, he was going for his 7th title, which is a hallowed number in the sport.
Yep. Yeah.
And he had a fight throughout the course of the day. Car wasn't great. It was a struggle at times. And they had very little hope. But I remember covering the pit throughout the day. And then toward the end, there was a crash that changed everything. And it was a crash at the front that involved some of the others who were in the chase. And that allowed Jimmy to have an opportunity. It moved him up toward the front on that final, I think it was the final restart. I'd have to go back. But it was one of the final restarts. And it allowed him to get back in the race, so to speak. He eventually got the lead, won the race, won the 7th championship. And I remember being in that pit stall and just being in the crush of emotion. There were, I'd have to say, close to 100 people surrounding that pit stall behind it that were with sponsors or with families of the team. And they all just came together in a big crush of emotion, just like a mosh pit, if you will, celebrating that championship. And I was in the middle of it, and I could feel the energy and I could feel the excitement. I was genuinely happy for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
because Jimmy not only won the championship, which he's won championships before, but this was number 7. This was
Right.
number 7. This tied him with Earnhardt and Petty. This put him on a different level. And to be there in that moment, something I'll never forget.
Yeah. I mean, I can just seeing you talk about it, I can see how much it meant to you and how much it put an impact of how you see the sport, today. Right. And, Jimmy, once once my self-proclaimed crush for Jeff Gordon kind of, I don't know, I got older and started to appreciate the drivers in the sport for what it is and who they are. I learned to appreciate Jimmy, and my best friend from home is a diehard Jimmy Johnson fan, lives, breathes, dies by Jimmy. And, even just hearing him talk about how much Jimmy Johnson meant to him is nothing short of spectacular. And every time, I mean, you talk about Jeff Gordon being a true professional. I mean, Jimmy was a class act, and I think that's why so many people speak so highly about him. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad I got to witness history and witness greatness. That's what I love.
Yeah, and you appreciate what you saw.
Exactly.
The sad part is a lot of people didn't during that time. He was and is one of the most amazing drivers on the planet, and he proved it. His statistics, some of those numbers will never be matched again. So what he did, if you can't appreciate it, then you can't appreciate true greatness on the racetrack.
I agree. I wrote an article about him. I don't know, probably like around Thanksgiving. I write for my local Emerson. Did they have WEBN? Was that a thing when you were there?
No. What is WEBN? Is that a website or is that
it's
a
radio
station?
Channel. It's like a channel there. So they do news, they do sport.
Yeah, television was black and white when I was back then. They only had typewriters. They didn't have computer. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't quite that far back. But we had WERS, which was the radio station.
Yep.
We did not have a TV station.
Gotcha.
We had WECB, which was also a radio station.
Yeah.
We had 2 radio stations, an AM and an FM.
Still both running and still both great. I mean, they do some great music. I love walking by listening to their music.
Well, ERS was a commercial radio station, still is. So that was unheard of at the time in that day and age. There weren't, I don't think, any other colleges in the country that had a commercial radio station, one that was broadcast, on the public airwaves and sold advertising. But they did well.
Yeah, I mean,
I know a lot of people went through there and continue to be in radio because of it.
Right. I actually know a buddy. He's in Knoxville now doing. I mean, he had a great voice. I mean, you could tell he would be right on radio, and so he did like the afternoon drive and was there every day, and he was great. But so I wrote an article about Jimmy a couple months ago, and one of the things I pointed out was just he was so dominant. I mean, like it was tough to match him on the racetrack. I mean, he was, I don't want to, I mean, maybe Tiger-esque of like for this many years, he was a dominating figure in the sport of NASCAR.
Yeah. There was a time where he couldn't be beat on a 1.5-mile racetrack. Places like Charlotte Motor Speedway were incredible for him. I think a lot of that had to do with his team. He had an unbelievable team. His crew chief, Chad Knaus. Let's not overlook Chad. Chad had a gigantic part of that success. Brilliant, really, totally brilliant. And together they were unstoppable at times. And you've got to admire that.
I would absolutely, love to get Chad on some of these crew chiefs, Chad, Ray on the pod and just listen to what they have to say and, everything that they talk about. Like we talk about preparation for the car and preparation at different tracks. I think it'd be amazing. But hey, you know what? Maybe one day, maybe one. Yeah. 5 years from now, Johnny on the Track will be on Dirty Mo Media or something, right?
Why 5 years, Johnny? It seems too far down the road. Why not next week?
We're going to shoot for that. We're going to shoot for that. So we are, near the end of this. but I always play a game with my guest. We've done a lot. We always
Are
get
there prizes? Do I win something?
You'll win some bragging rights.
Okay, I could use those.
Yeah, you'll win a promo on Twitter for
Okay.
400 plus people to see. I don't know if that sounds good enough.
Yeah, it sounds great to me. Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So this is called Fastest Lap Trivia. It's the first ever game we did.
Goodness.
How are you with trivia? You good?
Depends.
How are you?
What's the subject matter, Johnny?
Stafford Motor Speedway.
I could probably do okay there.
Okay, all right, good. So how this normally works is the track we're coming to this week. So obviously Richmond, you would get the fastest lap time ever recorded. I think it was something like 18 seconds to answer this. But there's a handful of names that you got to guess. So I'm actually going to give you 6 chances to guess 3.
To guess 3, okay.
Yes. So no time. You just got to, have it, go, and just
Can
go.
I give you as many as I want? Can I give you 12 to get 3? Can I give you 12 names?
You got to give 6 to get 3.
Oh, I'll give you 6. Okay.
All right. So the question is, and there are 6, to go on. So Stafford Speedway has housed many huge names in its history. Several who have raced at Stafford have also gone on to win in the NASCAR Cup Series, 6 to be in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Can you name 3 of these 6?
Ron Bouchard, Jeff Bodine, Steve Park. One at the Cup Series level?
Yeah, so hold on. So Ron Bouchard, you've got.
Ron Bouchard, Jeff Bodine, Steve Park.
Not Steve Park.
No, he has. I want to look that up.
Hold on, let me fact check here.
Watkins Glen and Rockingham the week after Dale Earnhardt died.
And he raced at Stafford?
Yeah, in the modified tour.
Oh my goodness, look at this.
Yeah, see, I'm correcting you. Do I get bonus points?
You get bonus points. All right, so look, you're 3 for 3. Come on.
All right. So,
what
I'm
else?
trying to think of the others at the Cup level.
Yep. This is impressive. He's 3 for 3.
Pete Hamilton?
I don't have him down.
Pete Hamilton would go back to the 60s. He won a Daytona 500. He's from Massachusetts, and I know he raced at Stafford.
Sheesh. I mean, look at me. I didn't even have all the names.
So let me think. In between there.
He definitely won at the Cup Series, and if you're saying he went to Stafford, there's another one.
Yeah. There's others who have made it to the Cup Series but haven't won in the Cup Series.
Priest
is a guy like Ryan Priest is in the Cup Series. Who else has made appearances in the Cup Series? Stafford guys. I think the history books may show that I think Brian Ross may have made a start in the Cup Series.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that raced like 3 to 9 races.
Right, but they didn't win. I think that's all I've got, Johnny. I mean, as far as winners go.
That's pretty good. I mean, you even had to correct me. So, I mean, this is going to be 4. We said 400 people would watch this. This might get up to 800. But so one actually just won yesterday. That is Martin Truex Jr.
Yes. But he wasn't a regular Stafford competitor, so I didn't put him in. He raced in the Busch North Series. So yes, but you're right. I should have mentioned that.
That's all right. That's you knew. Just that's okay.
His father raced a little. I think raced more at Stafford, Martin Truex Sr. But I don't remember Martin Truex Jr. running there on a regular basis. I think just in the Busch North.
Okay, so Martin,
just in touring series.
Yes.
So Steve Park, I mentioned modified tour, but he also raced an SK on occasion.
Okay, so then he was a regular. You mean?
Yeah, he was actually racing at Stafford when his final year at Stafford was when I was a public address announcer there.
Okay, gotcha. We've got Tim Richmond, we've got Jimmy Spencer, and we've got Dale Earnhardt Sr.
All right, so let me qualify a couple of those.
All right.
Tim Richmond only raced there on some sort of promotional race.
His tires touched that track.
I think I was actually there. So this was like probably 1980-ish, 80.
Yeah.
Like, so he was there. It was a promotional race. He was there. I think Richard Petty was there too. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. So Tim Richmond, I think you're taking some liberties. He was not a regular. But Jimmy Spencer, I'll give you Jimmy Spencer. Yeah, I'll give you Jimmy Spencer. Jimmy Spencer was a regular, obviously, on the modified tour, and I'm sure he raced there on a regular basis. That was a little bit before my time. And who was the other one you said?
Earnhardt Sr.
So Earnhardt Sr. is probably also part of that promotional race.
Yeah.
Richmond and Earnhardt. Yeah, I'm not going to say they were Stafford regulars. They were.
Okay. All right. That's fair. I had him down. You outshined everything I thought here.
The Pete Hamilton thing, I'm going to have to go back and look. That was way before my time. But I'm sure he raced at Stafford.
Yeah. I mean, look, all it had to be was just did their pinky toe touch Stafford Motor?
Apparently that's the criteria
for about a half a second or something. But yeah, so I mean that is all the time we have for Johnny on the Track. Mike, I had a great time listening to all the stories you could tell, and I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours about Emerson College, about Stafford Motor Speedway. We could talk about it all. But yeah, just thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch for sure.
Great, Johnny. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Love reminiscing, and for all those folks out there who do remember me doing NASCAR, I appreciate you tuning into this podcast. I miss all of them as well.
Perfect. All right. So this has been Johnny on the Track. We had Mike Massaro on. And Mike, how about you and I catch a race at Stafford sometime, all right?
Well, I may be there more often than you expect this year. Stay tuned.
Sounds good to me. All right. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Johnny.